And I found myself with a flock of 50 swifts climbing up to 2,000 meters. And it was such an amazing experience that actually changed my attitude in my life.
You are listening to Urban Wildlife Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Urban Wildlife Podcast. Starting off without Tony for part of it. Hung up at a meeting, listened to some people read manifestos to a park advisory board. Like straight out of Parks and Recreation. He's like our burly, bearded Leslie Knope. And so just as some of the standard reminders, if you like this podcast, please go into your podcasting platform of choice, whether that's Stitcher or iTunes, and rate the podcast. Please tell other people that you like it. That can be through whatever platform you want. Facebook, Twitter, pass notes around. I don't care. Call people. Let them know that you love the podcast if you do. Feel free to get in touch with us at urbanwildlifecast@gmail.com. You can hit us up on Twitter at urbwildlifecast, and you can find us on Facebook. All great ways to get us some feedback. Let us know how you think we're doing, any ideas for future topics, and any other feedback. So I'm here with
Helena Van Vliet.
And Helena is...
I'm a biophilic architect. I'm also one of the founders of Biophily. Biophily is a, shall we say, sister organization of Biophilic Cities, which is an international network of cities that was begun by Professor Tim Beatley of UVA maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and with the idea that cities need to become places of wild and biodiverse nature, because most of the global population is either living already in cities, 54% already, and so we need to solve our problems that we have on the planet. We need to start solving them in cities. So Biophily is an organization that wants to engage designers, but also just anybody really, in reimagining Philadelphia as a natureful city where every resident has daily and regular contact and experience with biodiverse nature. And for me personally, I'm a biophilic architect, so I came to this work from a concern for the sense of place. I also consider my profession a healthcare profession, so I'm very interested in the physiological experience of place and the health effects that it has. And biophilia in general takes sustainability into an emotional realm. So biophilia, philia means love. Mm-hmm. So it's very much about the emotional connection to a place that we foster through a multisensory experience, through touch and smell and hearing and an all-body experience. And I feel, and a lot of us feel, that sustainability, when we move sustainability into biophilia, it becomes something that we want to engage with, because over time we conserve what we love. And if we can learn to love the place that we live in, we will be much more likely to take care of it. Loving the planet is very abstract for our old brains, yeah. But loving our backyard or our front yard or our balcony or our little area is much more tangible.
What is biophilic architecture versus sustainable versus the kind of LEED certifications we're more used to hearing about, that sort of thing?
Yeah, you can have LEED certified buildings that, for instance, kill a great number of birds, yeah, because they're reflective glass, for instance, or something. So a biophilic building would be a building that is very energy efficient, but also integrates well into nature and permits a nature experience, a seasonal experience that connects people with nature That's how I consider it. So there are many different aspects of that. There's an aspect of how the periphery is designed, for instance, that it doesn't have hard edges, it has soft edges, so that there are transitional spaces designed into it. That maybe it has screen facades, maybe it opens and closes to experience weather patterns. It has a non-human centric point of view, and that's the way I look at biophilia also. To me it's a non-human centric effort.
Okay.
So we kind of rediscover symbiotic relationships with all other life forms, which turns out we can learn a lot from. Other organisms, animals, bacteria, fungi, they've been builders and makers and designers for eons and have created a beautiful planet without us.
So my question is, so those are principles. How are we applying those now in Philadelphia?
Right. So in terms of the urban environment in Philadelphia, what we want to do is reimagine the city as a place of wild and biodiverse nature. So we as organisms, as I said, we as biological organisms grew up in a biodiverse world. That's how we designed.
Yeah.
And we still prefer that. We love that. It makes us feel comfortable. It makes us feel joyful. It inspires a sense of wonder. We now have the neuroscience and the medical research that proves to us that it's good for us. Our blood pressure comes down. Our stress level comes down. It is healthy. And so how do we reimagine the city as a place for all sorts of species to kind of live in a symbiotic relationship? And we started thinking about, when we started working with Keith also...
and just for references...
Keith Russell from Audubon, we talked a lot about looking at Philadelphia from a bird point of view. And my particular interest is really in a non-human centric point of view, where we say, okay, so there are all kinds of other critters living in the city. I remember Tim Beatley, who I mentioned earlier, who began the Biophilic Cities movement. He had us at the launch conference, I think it was in 2013 or 14. He had us down in Charlottesville looking for ants in the city.
Sure.
And everybody gets down there, but here's this whole conference, and everybody is now having a paradigm shift
outside.
Okay, but on the UVA campus, right around the buildings.
Yeah.
So how many species of ants do you people see?
Yeah.
And of course the point is there are all these worlds under our feet that we've forgotten are there. So there are all these little and large worlds, and all these different creatures are interacting with us and living in and amongst us. And we talked about reimagining buildings as habitat areas, and that's some of the Swift work that...
this is right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's my particular interest as an architect. If I take a tall building and I understand that a bird thinks of that maybe as a mountain or a series of cliffs that you might want to build a nest on or rest on or feed on. So how do I design this building so it is a habitat, not a bird killer?
Yeah.
And what is that? How does that building change? Now we know we have a lot of buildings in Philadelphia that kill a lot of birds. There are a lot of birds flying through on the Atlantic
Flyway.
Yeah. I cannot profess to know even a fraction of what Keith knows about this. I'm learning.
Keith knows more than anyone else does about what flies through Philadelphia.
He really does. So I have understood that birds fly like weather systems, and they just move in these giant, just cloud-like formations.
You can see them on radar images.
Yeah. But what we started to do is we started to develop a habitat map where we say, okay, so let's imagine this city as a habitat, and let's mark all the green areas and all the potential, the existing habitat areas and the potential habitat areas, and let's connect all these dots, and let's see where we can where we have holes in this tapestry of green. Let's see where we can create pollinator corridors. Let's see where we can have resting places, nesting places, and so forth. And my personal goal is to identify the areas that are the holes in the tapestry and start working on them in terms of adopt a block or adopt an empty lot, or have small groups of residents or school children or communities or something take care and own these little spaces and turn them into wild little wilderness areas.
Sure.
That we can then connect, little by little by little by little. What I'm talking about is nothing particularly revolutionary. It's not something particularly
I think
new.
it is. I mean, it's revolution. Depending how you apply it to urban landscapes, it could be. It's only the past few years people have started to pay attention to bird collisions with windows.
Yeah.
And some of the ways that certainly plants, lichen, etc., will colonize buildings through what I think of as older surfaces like brick or stone. As I watch sort of the totally glass, skyscrapers go up around Philadelphia, it's hard to imagine seeing a peregrine falcon or a red-tailed hawk perched on there, or see patterns of lichen grow on the brick, see ferns grow out of the mortar between stones or something like that. And so it seems like the surfaces in the design that I see going up around at least this city is particularly unfriendly to other things. I don't know. Maybe in 100 years it'll look different, but
well, no, I think that's exactly right. What you asked me a little while ago. A LEED building can be a biophilic building, but not every LEED building is a biophilic building. And in the latest building standards, like the Living Building Challenge standard, I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Nope.
Biophilia is included in that as a requirement.
What is the Living Building Standard?
Living Building Challenge. It's another building standard which includes aspects of health and happiness and equity in the project.
Okay.
But in terms of the periphery of buildings that you mentioned, the hard edges, very much to me as a biophilic architect, that's exactly it. How does the building meet the ground? How does the building meets the area around it? Is it a soft edge or a hard edge? If it's a soft edge, it probably sustains life. It can sustain life. Our life and the life of other species. By soft edge, I mean it's a layered edge. It maybe is a green wall, green facades. Maybe it has crevices or balconies, or it doesn't. It's not just inside outside. It has a depth to it. It has recesses. It has little cavities where life can happen, where nesting can happen.
Yeah.
Some of the buildings that you were showing in Italy, the old Swift towers.
Yeah.
Were buildings that had very sculpted facades with recesses and opportunities for life to occur. E.O. Wilson, who is sort of one of the fathers of biophilia.
Well, if you're using the term biophilia, you
right. Well, what he said, will humans love life enough to save it? He asked that question.
Yeah.
And so, to me, biophilic design is life creating conditions for life, not just for ours.
And for background, E.O. Wilson is a sort of very prominent entomologist, ecologist, who's written about an idea, biophilia, that we are just innately drawn to other life or to life in general, and have an innate sort of love of nature and so that's how we see that, and that's where the concept is getting pulled into the design that.
Yes, and I always related back to evolution, that we really are biological organisms that prefer very specific circumstances that we have evolved to do well in, and that have contributed to our survival.
Okay.
And we still prefer them. And the thing about nature, also, if we can foster the daily experience of nature in our cities, from the smallest to the largest, we also find that a sense of wonder and a sense of awe is maintained in us. And the very new research from Berkeley, a psychology lab, actually has shown that a sense of wonder and awe is one of the most socializing emotions. It helps us to transcend ourselves.
Sure.
And to be more cooperative, to think outside of ourselves and in a more collective sense.
So I'm going to use that as a segue and record a little bit of intro of Amnon Hahn, who I talked to about Swifts in Israel. So for background, Amnon was a service manager for a vehicle repair company dealing mostly with motorcycles and had taken up paragliding as a hobby. This is taking a large parachute and then taking advantage of winds and thermals and updrafts to get yourself into the air with your giant paraglider thing, which looks like a giant parachute, and then fly around with that thing. Now it's up there along with like skydiving is one of these things that I'm probably too afraid to ever try, but now I'm kind of curious. But he talked about how they would use Swifts as indicators of thermals.
Yeah.
And he talked about how at the end of one particular 3-day competition, the conditions weren't great. At the end of the third day, he was gliding back down after one last unsuccessful takeoff, and we pick it up there with him. And you'll hear about how he was struck by this sense of wonder and awe as he found himself within this flock of Swifts. That sort of kindled in him like this urge to this passion to preserve Swifts.
And I took off in the last 5-7 minutes and gliding down to the field where all my friends were out there. Nothing happened, and all of a sudden I heard the screaming of the Swifts. And I said, okay, if there are Swifts, it's always a good indication, and I decided to fly towards their direction. And I found myself with a flock of 50 Swifts climbing up to 2,000 meters. And it was such an amazing experience that actually changed my attitude in my life, really. All of a sudden, you realize, not those small birds that you see from the distance. They are like flying boomerangs. They have very long span wings, and although they are narrow, but they're very, very long, and they are beautiful creatures. They have these black metal body color, and they have a very fascinating wide throat. And the eyes, I was amazed by the eyes. They have these big, like teddy bears, the toys, and amazing. And the way they moved, the way they maneuvered in the air, it was unbelievable. And I could hear the special cracking sound that they create when they change their flight directions. It was unbelievable, amazing experience. My name is Amnon Hahn. I'm the general manager and the founder of organization Friends of the Swifts. It's an association, official association registered in Israel 2007.
What do we know about the history of Swifts on man-made structures in Israel? I mean, buildings have not been there forever, but they've been there for a very long time.
Well, we know that they adopted man-made constructions or buildings or houses as their nesting places. And this is not only, of course, mainly because of the old way of building, which is not like the modern technology, which is sealed and hermetic, as now buildings are being made. In the old days, when people started to live together and left the caves and started to make their own constructions for living in, Swift found that as optimal for their own use, for the way they will step out and fly. Because as you know, Swift, at least the common Swift, lives on the wing all the time, except for the nesting period. For this reason, has no active legs. It's not standing on its legs. In addition to that, also because of the fact that they spend most of their time on the wing, their wings are very, very narrow and they're very, very long. And they need a minimum of airspeed to obtain the minimum lift they need to keep themselves in the air. So once they leave the nest, even an adult swift falls down like 3 meters if there's no wind. It's able to gain the minimum lift it needs to fly and to control its direction. And I know it because you can, whoever watching swift nests and see the swifts going out to fly, they fall down 2 to 3 meters. So they need places in vertical walls so that they will have no obstacles on their way to take off. And they have to be in high places. And it seems like whoever spotted it in ancient times was Jeremiah the prophet, who actually also is the first one to give them their name in Hebrew. It's Sis, S-W-E-S, you can pronounce it like this, which is called onomatopoeic name. The name is given because of the sounds they produce when they communicate. It's a high tone whistle. And that's why he calls them the Sis. Later on, they adopted another description, Sis HaChomot, which means the swift of the walls, because people spotted them entering the walls of the ancient urban areas, the walls of the houses or the walls that surrounded urban communities of the ancient times.
Okay. And I got to admit, the hook for me for this topic, why I started looking into it specifically was reading about swifts at the Kotel, at the Western Wall. Can you talk a little bit about that population?
Well, of course. Actually, as far as I know, the first report about swift nesting in the Kotel came from a rabbi named Joseph Kornfeld. He made the report about the swift nesting in the Kotel to this guy in Berlin, Ulrich Tigges, the swift researcher. And this guy, Ulrich from Berlin, he decided to come over to Israel and to make a study about the swift nesting in the Kotel. And it was published. He made it together with the late Professor Mendelssohn from the Tel Aviv University. Spent nearly 3 weeks with a map of the Western Wall, and they spotted each nest, each entrance in between giant stones of the Western Wall. They spotted 88 nesting sites. What we have decided to make after we founded the association, we made a ceremony in Jerusalem with the city of Jerusalem and with the officials from the Western Wall and including the rabbi of the Kotel himself, making a welcome ceremony for the Swift in the Western Wall. And it had become like a habit to do it year after year, together with the city of Jerusalem and the Society for Protection of Nature in Israel and all whoever is a nature lover in Israel and a bird watcher are welcome to join.
I mean, there's a lot of species of animals and plants that take to the things that we build or the landscapes that we create. But some of them are so much that we give them names that convey that. And so, given in Europe, in the Middle East, they just called them. Well, actually, he was saying that in Hebrew they refer to them as wall swifts.
When I watched the Swift videos that you shared with me, I was reminded of this bridge in Austin where the bats. Have you heard of that bridge?
Oh yeah.
Well, it's the same kind of thing where just thousands of people turn up to just be in awe.
Oh yeah. And there's so the bats and so we were some of the things we'll link to are some of the videos from Israel, but also we're also going to hear from a swift conservationist in Wisconsin, and sort of looking at swift conservation in the American Midwest. And some of the videos we'll link to and put out for social media and stuff are of the swifts heading back into chimneys. And this is something I've wanted to see in Philadelphia, but I haven't quite pinned down the right chimney. I was in a town called Towanda, which is in what we call the northern tier of Pennsylvania, the counties up along the border with New York. And I was just looking across the street, and I saw a couple swifts just sort of duck down into a chimney. And it's kind of funny how they do it. Well, that's what they do while they're nesting. And then at the end of the nesting season, after all the chicks have fledged, they sort of group up together in bigger and bigger flocks, and will have large chimneys or large other spaces, old buildings, what have you, that they use and just go in all together. And so it looks like reverse smoke coming down into a smokestack.
Karen Etter Hale. I'm the chairperson of the Wisconsin Bird Conservation Initiative. Chimney swifts are a pretty small bird. It's one of our aerial insectivores. It spends almost its entire life on the wing, and it can only perch on vertical surfaces like inside chimneys. So historically, they used to nest in large hollow trees in the old forests. But once Europeans came to this country and started building homes with chimneys, especially the brick chimneys, the chimney swift population increased quite a lot, actually, and that's where we see them, and that's why they're called chimney swifts.
How do we know they increased a lot? This is something that we've kicked around as a topic just amongst ourselves that are, and I know even just emailing back and forth just now that sometimes historical numbers on populations are hard to come by. Do we know anything about sort of the extent of their increase, or how is that documented?
Well, we really don't know probably historically how many swifts there were, but if you just think about the eastern half of the U.S. being covered largely in forest, and then how many large trees might have been suitable for roosting or nesting, and then you think about the huge increase in towns, small to large, across that space, I think we can very safely say that the swift population is a lot bigger now than it was before the recent civilization and the building of all of these homes and factories too, and large buildings.
Okay.
But we don't have actual numbers, and it is hard to get numbers even from year to year here. But they do have the federal breeding bird surveys, and that's what they're looking at as far as the populations. And long term, range wide, they have been declining, and that would be from 1966 to 2010, I think, is the latest analysis, and it declined about 2.2% per year.
Okay. So in what kind of areas in Wisconsin do you see them? Where do you small towns, big towns?
You'd probably see them in almost every small town across the state in the summer. They do eat insects, so you won't find them here in Wisconsin until early May for the most part, and then they start leaving in August from northern Wisconsin, and September and into October from more southern areas of the state. And certainly the larger towns, especially in the evenings, you can see them going to roost in the chimneys. So people need to look up and just pay attention and see what's going on, especially in August when they're done nesting and they start gathering to roost for the night. There can be some real spectacular roosts in the later part of the summer and into the fall.
Describe what it looks like. What is it? What about it is spectacular?
Yeah, well, some of the bigger ones are 100 to up to 1,000, and even more swifts. And as it gets darker and darker, they're still out feeding, and they start gathering as it gets darker. And then a few start going down into the chimney, and then as as it gets almost sometimes too dark to see, they start funneling in faster and faster. It's almost like reverse smoke coming down the chimney. And they're just swirling around. And there's always a few that just, oh, no, I'm not going in. So they just keep flying. And the other really odd thing we think is that they don't always use the same chimney. So there's a big one in Madison. It's the biggest one that we found in the state so far. It was at one of the middle schools, and they estimated 2,800 swifts going down that chimney. 2 years later, there weren't any going down that chimney. What will happen next year? We don't know. So it is hard to estimate the numbers of swifts, but that was just a real spectacle. People were going on field trips. They would just come and watch that chimney in August or early September. It was just incredible. And you can see that on the Wisconsin Chimney Swift Working Group homepage. There is a video posted right now. We're trying to upgrade the website. It's pretty out of date right now, but there is a video of that swift roost.
Very neat. That's a good thing for us to be able to link to on social media when we end up posting the episode. Can you talk a little bit about what the working group is doing? I mean, well, I won't get too far. Go ahead. Explain, what are the kind of activities that the working group does?
We're trying to do a variety of things. It is a statewide effort. We're trying to, first of all, just identify and protect roost chimneys. We don't even know where they all are. Some people have seen them, but they haven't reported them. There hasn't been any formal way to organize all that data. We are trying to, of course, educate people about the fact that there are swifts there, what they are, that they're even out there, and then to just try to encourage people to go out, especially, like I said, August, September, to identify and let us know about these chimney swift roosts. We're encouraging everyone to use eBird because that's accessible to everyone, but they can report it otherwise too. And another thing we're doing is trying to encourage people to go out and look for chimneys that are used by a pair of birds for nesting in June and July. We're in the second year of our second Wisconsin Breeding Bird Atlas coming up, and we'll be doing a big push to try to get people out there to locate nesting chimneys. So there's a whole variety of things that the working group is doing. There is some field research that is being done, too, by the Western Great Lakes Bird and Bat Observatory. They're going to be looking at these artificial chimneys that people put up, the roost towers, or the nesting towers. They're more for nesting than for large. They're not large roosts, but for nesting, because they're not working very well in Wisconsin right now. And we think they need to be insulated. We think they need to be sited properly, and so the observatory is going to be looking into the details on that. So that's some of what we're doing.
Things. Okay. But that is interesting. They're not working. Those are some. You just mentioned the ideas why. Okay, cool. It's funny. You sort of preempted a question while my brain was still like, wait, ask about the towers. So then we've nearly covered everything I wanted to ask about. It's a couple more questions. So even if you're not in Wisconsin, what are ways that people can do things to help their local swifts if they're looking up above the rooftops in some other place and they're like, hey, those are really neat. I've heard they're in decline. What should I do?
The first thing people should do is keep an eye on them. See if you can actually find where they're nesting or roosting. That can be a bit tricky to do if you're trying to find a nest location. Watch for the swifts in late May, early June. They go through the edges of trees and snap off little branches for their nest. And then they'll fly back to a chimney. The trick is to follow them and try to find the chimney. Later in the summer, like I said earlier, try to find the roost chimneys. That isn't always easy either. You'll hear the swifts above chittering, and you might even see them gathering, and then you'll lose track of them. and maybe it might take a few nights before you figure out which chimney exactly they're going down. The other important thing that people can do, besides reporting them to eBird, is keep your chimneys, especially your old brick chimneys, uncapped, and keep the damper closed so that they'll be safer when they're nesting in your chimney. A lot of chimneys are being capped now.
What do you mean by capped?
People are concerned about their other creatures getting down their chimney, and that is a problem, like raccoons. Sometimes wood ducks come down chimneys looking for good nesting sites. They get trapped, or they end up in your living room. So people are capping their chimney, putting a cap over it, so there's some venting, but the creatures can't get in, but swifts can't get in either. Newer homes are built without chimneys anymore at all, or they're lined with metal flues, and the birds can't use those. And we're losing the big old chimneys too. The big ones that are in downtown sometimes, the manufacturing ones, you can see them, are on schools, and a lot of those are being knocked down. So we need to protect keep those uncapped if you can.
So I have a question. This is more of just an opinion or speculative kind of question. So we've talked about how the chimney swifts are declining relative to what they were, I guess, in the middle part of the 20th century, and our sort of, I think, informed assumption that their populations are much higher from that point than they were sort of pre-colonization. So then, are they? Does it matter in a conservation sense if they're declining from kind of an artificial high? I mean, that might not. I'm not saying is it a good or a bad thing that we should intervene, but how do we categorize this kind of effort? Is it a sort of like a local environmental effort? Is it in a way like sort of a city or urban character, like almost historical preservation kind of effort? How do you think of it?
Well, humans have changed the surface of the earth so much that we can never go back to pre-colonization times. So we have to start at some point, and then see what's happening. And we actually don't know why the swifts have been declining we know they've been declining since the mid-60s overall. But we don't actually know why they're declining. And there's people looking into that too. It could be the habitat, not enough chimneys, but actually some people don't think that's the case at all. We think it could be pesticides and the decline of aerial insects, because the other aerial insectivores, like swallows, nighthawks, some of the flycatchers, whippoorwills, a lot of those are declining too, and some of them quite precipitously. So we really need to look at all the different factors and try to figure out why the swifts and some of these other insectivores are declining. What's happening out there? So I don't think we can't go back to pre-colonization. We have to start at some point and then see what's going on. And if the swifts keep declining, something's wrong. I think something's probably wrong.
So it's good to put it in that kind of broader context. Thank you. So we've run through all the questions I had to ask. Do you have anything else that you'd like to toss in or mention at the end?
Just say that swifts are just really, really cool birds, and we can't. A lot of us can't wait till they come back each year, and we just have them back in our neighborhoods. And I guess I would add that they're not just in urban areas too, or even small towns. We have found them nesting in silos out in rural areas and in other surprising places, and a few of them in the old trees too, but pretty rare these days. But they're really cool, so get out and watch for them.
Hey, podcast listeners.
We had so much great material for this episode that we split it into 2 parts. So please pick us back up for the part 2 and hear about Italian swift conservation, wall lizards in Maastricht in the Netherlands, and dolphins in Aberdeen, Scotland.